Welcome to Raven Hollow, a small, forgotten town nestled deep in the woods, where the fog clings to the streets like a ghostly veil, and the wind carries whispers of forgotten horrors. Every Halloween, something unexplainable happens in Raven Hollow. The town, once full of life, is now infamous for the disappearances that occur on October 31st. This is the story of a curse, a legend that still haunts Raven Hollow, and the night when 5 friends decided to uncover the dark truth. It all started decades ago, in the year 1923. The Raven Hollow witch trials were held in the town square. A woman named Eliza Greaves was accused of practicing dark magic after several children went missing from the town. Eliza was a healer, but fear and superstition clouded the townspeople's judgment. They dragged her from her home, claiming she had cursed the land, and despite her pleas of innocence, they burned her alive at the stake. Before her death, Eliza cursed the town, swearing that on Halloween, when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest, she would return to exact her revenge. "I will come for your children. You will pay for your cruelty," were her last words, whispered on the wind as the flames consumed her. For years, nothing happened, and people began to forget the curse. But then, in 1952, a young boy named Timothy vanished on Halloween night. His parents found only his jacket, torn and covered in mud, near the edge of the forest. No one knew what happened, but whispers of the curse resurfaced. Over the next several decades, more children disappeared every Halloween, always without a trace. The town fell into despair, and many families left, but those who stayed lived in fear. They warned their children never to venture out after dark on October 31st. But no matter how careful they were, the curse always claimed someone. Now, in present-day Raven Hollow, the town is a shadow of its former self. The once lively streets are empty, the houses abandoned, and only a few stubborn residents remain. Among them are 5 teenagers, Tom, Sarah, Jake, Emily, and Chris, who have grown up hearing the tales of the witch and her curse. It's Halloween night, and the group of friends has gathered at Tom's house, discussing the legend. Despite the warnings from their parents, they are determined to uncover the truth. The more they talked about it, the more they felt a pull toward Raven Hollow Forest, the place where all the children had disappeared. They believed that if they could survive the night in the forest, they might break the curse once and for all. "We're going to prove this whole thing is just a stupid story," Tom said confidently, though a nervous edge crept into his voice. As the clock struck 11 p.m., they grabbed their flashlights and set out for the forest. The cold October air bit at their skin, and the fog seemed thicker than usual, curling around the trees like claws. As they approached the forest, the air grew colder, unnaturally so. The shadows danced along the treetops, and the eerie silence was only broken by the crunch of leaves underfoot. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Emily whispered, her eyes darting around the trees. "We'll be fine," Jake said, but even he seemed uncertain. They ventured deeper into the woods, their flashlights flickering as if something was draining the power. They reached an old clearing, where a single twisted tree stood. Beneath the tree was a weathered stone that looked like a gravestone. On it were the words, "Here lies Eliza Greaves, the witch of Raven Hollow." Suddenly, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. Their flashlights went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled with the lights, but when they finally flickered back on, they saw her, Eliza Greaves, standing at the edge of the clearing. Her ghostly figure was pale, with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted in an eternal scream of rage. Her long black hair whipped in the wind, and she seemed to float above the ground. The air around her was ice cold, and the ground trembled with her presence. "You dare to trespass on my land?" Eliza hissed, her voice echoing unnaturally. "The curse lives, and tonight you shall join the others." The friends screamed and ran in different directions, their terror overwhelming them. But the forest seemed to twist and shift around them, turning into a labyrinth. No matter where they ran, they always ended up back at the cursed tree, with Eliza growing closer each time. Tom tripped and fell, his ankle twisted painfully. "Help!" he yelled, but the others were too far gone in their panic. As he tried to stand, he saw the ground beneath the tree split open, and from the earth rose the lost children of Raven Hollow. Their faces pale and eyes empty, their whispers echoing in the night. "You should have stayed away," one of the children said, their voice hollow and lifeless. Chris, seeing Tom's plight, ran back to help him, but it was too late. Eliza reached out a hand, her long, bony fingers wrapping around Tom's wrist. He screamed as the ground swallowed him whole, vanishing beneath the cursed earth. The remaining friends could only watch in horror as Tom disappeared. But as the earth closed, they noticed something. The witch hesitated. The children, too, seemed less menacing, as if they were waiting for something. Suddenly, Sarah realized the key to ending the curse. "It's the grave!" she shouted. "We need to break the curse by setting her free." With newfound courage, the friends rushed to the stone that marked Eliza's grave. Chris grabbed a rock and began smashing the gravestone, while Jake and Sarah frantically dug at the earth beneath it. As the gravestone shattered, a burst of light erupted from the ground. Eliza let out an ear-piercing scream, her ghostly form flickering and growing weaker. "No!" she shrieked. "You cannot break the curse. I will return." The curse was broken, but not without a price. As they limped back to town, the fog began to lift, and the eerie silence was replaced by the sound of wind rustling through the trees. The curse of Raven Hollow had finally been lifted, but the memory of the witch and her vengeance would haunt the town forever. The walk back to town was silent, the weight of what had just transpired hanging heavy in the air. Sarah, Chris, Emily, and Jake had made it out alive, but Tom was gone, swallowed by the cursed ground under Eliza Greaves's grave. The events of the night had changed them forever, leaving them shaken and haunted. As they approached the edge of the forest, a strange calmness settled over them. The fog that had clung to the streets of Raven Hollow for years seemed to have lifted. The eerie silence that once permeated the town had been replaced by the soft sounds of nature, rustling leaves, and the distant calls of birds. "Do you think it's really over?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red from crying. Chris didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, trying to process everything they had experienced. "I don't know," he finally replied. "But whatever that was, it's gone now. The curse is broken." They trudged through the quiet streets of Raven Hollow, passing darkened houses and empty shops. The town felt different, lighter somehow, but the loss of Tom loomed over them like a shadow. They reached the old town square, where they sat on the stone steps of the abandoned library, trying to catch their breath and make sense of what had happened. "Do we tell someone?" Jake asked, glancing at the others nervously. "I mean, who's going to believe us, that we fought a witch, that Tom—" "We have to tell his parents," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "They deserve to know what happened. We owe them that much." The group nodded in agreement, though none of them were eager to face Tom's family. They knew it would be devastating. Over the next few days, Raven Hollow was abuzz with rumors. The disappearance of Tom had shaken the small town to its core. For the first time in years, people were talking about the curse again. But now, there was a different energy. Something had changed. It wasn't just fear. It was a feeling that the town had been freed from the dark cloud that had hung over it for so long. Tom's parents were inconsolable. No one could explain what had happened to their son, and the group of friends knew that the truth was far too unbelievable to be accepted. They stuck to a simpler version of events. Tom had gotten separated from them in the forest, and when they returned to look for him, he was gone. The search parties found nothing. No sign of Tom, no trace of where he might have gone. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole, because in truth it had. Despite the tragedy, the group couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The fog had lifted, and the heavy sense of dread that once filled the air was gone. As the days passed, people began to speak of the town's curse in the past tense, as if it had finally ended. But Sarah, Chris, Emily, and Jake knew better. They had broken the curse, yes, but they had also awakened something far older, something far more dangerous. One night, a week after Halloween, Sarah found herself drawn back to the attic of her house. It had always been a creepy place, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories, but tonight it felt different. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a strange compulsion to go up there, as if something, or someone, was calling her. As she reached the top of the stairs, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. In the far corner of the attic, buried under years of dust and cobwebs, was an old trunk. It wasn't the kind of thing she would have missed before, but somehow it had escaped her attention all these years. Curiosity piqued, she approached the trunk and knelt down, brushing away the dust. The metal latch creaked as she opened it, revealing a collection of old yellowed papers, strange symbols drawn in ink, and a book bound in cracked leather. The cover was embossed with a symbol that sent a shiver down her spine, the same symbol that had been etched into Eliza Greaves's grave. Her breath caught in her throat. She realized with growing dread that this wasn't over. The curse may have been broken, but the story of Raven Hollow wasn't finished. Eliza Greaves was gone, but she had left something behind. Something ancient. Something powerful. And it was in Sarah's attic, she said, her voice tense. "It's not over." Chris, Jake, and Emily exchanged worried glances, but followed Sarah back to her house. When they reached the attic and saw the contents of the trunk, a heavy silence fell over them. "What is this?" Jake asked, picking up one of the papers covered in strange writing. "I think it's a spell book," Sarah said quietly. "I don't know how, but it's connected to Eliza Greaves." Emily shuddered. "Why would this be here, in your attic?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, shaking her head. "But I think we've uncovered something much bigger than the curse. Eliza wasn't just a victim of superstition. She was a real witch, and I think her magic is still here." Chris, always the skeptic, frowned. "So, what? Are we supposed to believe that her spirit is still lingering, even after we broke the curse?" Sarah met his gaze, her eyes filled with fear. "I think we unleashed something darker, and I think we need to stop it before it gets worse." The group spent the next few days poring over the book, trying to decipher its contents. They quickly realized that the symbols and spells weren't just remnants of a past curse. They were the key to something much older and far more dangerous. The book spoke of summoning rituals, dark spirits, and ancient forces that predated even Eliza Greaves. As they delved deeper, strange things began to happen around town. People reported seeing shadowy figures in the woods at night. Children complained of hearing whispers in their homes. The fog, which had lifted after Halloween, began to creep back into the streets, thicker and more oppressive than ever before. It was clear something had returned to Raven Hollow, and this time, it wasn't just the ghost of Eliza Greaves. It was something far worse, a force that had been awakened by their meddling, and it was growing stronger every day. The friends realized they had only one option left. They needed to reverse the spell that had been cast, to undo what they had unwittingly unleashed. But time was running out. Halloween had passed, but the town was still in danger. The longer they waited, the stronger the evil became. As they prepared for one final confrontation with the dark forces that had taken root in Raven Hollow, they knew one thing for sure. The curse wasn't over. It had only just begun.